सीधा भारतीय विदेश विभाग के जो प्रवक्ता हैं विकास स्वरूप, उनकी प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस में ले चलते हैं वॉशिंगटन।
Last evening and what to expect today. Prime Minister's first bilateral engagement of the day was a meeting with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada. You will recall that Prime Minister, when he had visited Canada last year, he had had a bilateral meeting with Mr. Trudeau, who was then the leader of the opposition. He had also met Mr. Trudeau's daughter, Ella Grace, at that time. And this was their first meeting since Mr. Trudeau became the next Prime Minister of Canada. Prime Minister began the meeting by congratulating him on his fantastic win in the elections. He said that ever since Mr. Trudeau had taken over the post of Prime Minister, Indo-Canadian relations had got new energy, dynamism, and speed. And the subjects that Prime Minister had discussed with Mr. Trudeau during their last meeting in Canada were all now being implemented on the ground. The possibilities on the economic side were immense, Prime Minister said. He also lamented the fact that Indo-Canadian economic relations had not reached their full potential yet. And he reiterated what he had said earlier also, that India and Canada are two countries which are literally made for each other. He said that Canada has the natural resources, all the natural resources in the world. India has the need for those resources as well as the manpower. Prime Minister also recalled his meeting with the heads of the Canadian pension funds and said that since that meeting, many positive developments had happened, and Canadian pension funds were already investing more than $8 billion in India. Prime Minister Trudeau complimented Prime Minister on his excellent intervention last evening at the White House dinner. He said that India and Canada can both be leaders in the non-proliferation arena in the world. Prime Minister said that we had had very fruitful partnership with Canada in the area of climate change and environment. In this context, he referred to their working together closely in the lead-up to and during COP21. Prime Minister mentioned that India had set very ambitious renewable energy targets, in particular the target of reaching 175 gigawatts in terms of renewable energy. He says within that, our focus would be on nuclear energy, which, as you know, is clean energy. He said that our relationship with Canada in this area has been progressing very well. You will recall that when Prime Minister had gone to Canada last year, they had signed an agreement for the supply of uranium, which has since happened. Prime Minister but also alluded to the fact that India, as the land of Buddha and Gandhi, is also totally committed to non-violence. Then Prime Minister referred to some of his flagship programs. He talked about the 500 cities where, as you know, renewable energy infrastructure is to be built in terms of waste management, converting waste into energy. He also talked about the Smart Cities project, the project to bring metro transport to as many as 50 cities in India, and said that all this will lead not only to better quality of life for Indian citizens, but also the introduction of ecologically friendly technologies. And he said that Canadian companies stand a very big chance in bagging contracts if they were to invest in these sectors in India. He also said that considering that 800 million people in India are below the age of 35, skilling our youth is a top priority for the government. And there also, Canada can contribute a lot. You will recall that when Prime Minister had gone to Canada last year, several MOUs were signed with Canadian community colleges and polytechnics. Prime Minister then mentioned the fact that Canada also has a surplus of human resource capital. He said that Canadian professors and teachers, including retired faculty members, could consider coming to India during the harsh winter months in Canada and teaching at Indian universities for periods ranging from 3 to 6 months under the GIAN, the GIAN program. And this would allow India to receive quality education, and that would certainly receive a big boost. Mr. Trudeau said absolutely, he totally concurred with this suggestion and said that he had been a school teacher himself, and many of the school teachers during his time had been overseas. In fact, he said that unfortunately as many people who could have gone to India did not go to India. So there's a real potential, he said, for harnessing the opportunity of helping so many young people in India get better skills. And Canada would also be happy to provide education and infrastructure support. He talked about Canadian expertise in environmental-friendly technologies, in dealing with climate change, in anti-poverty strategies, and innovations which could help the global economy as also the planet. Prime Minister said that yes, poverty alleviation is an important plank for his government. Until the benefits reach the last person in society, we cannot say that we have been successful. Prime Minister then talked about a very important initiative that had been announced in the last budget. This is the announcement of very progressive policies for the hydrocarbon sector, in particular for deep sea and high temperature exploration. He said that these sectors have now been opened up. The sector will be entirely market driven, and the policies would allow top companies from abroad to participate in the Indian market now in this sector. Canadian companies, he said, have a lot of expertise in exploration, and they could be partners for us in technology as well as in investment. This policy, as you know, this hydrocarbon policy has come into effect from today, the 1st of April. And Prime Minister also mentioned that India has the third largest coal reserves in the world. But fossil fuels pose a challenge to the environment, and that is why India had already started working on coal gasification and underground mining, again, for which Canadian companies have the requisite expertise and they could participate in the Indian sectors. Mr. Trudeau acknowledged that, yes, Canada does have a strong energy sector, and he wanted to work with India's in ways which was less harmful to the environment. And he said Canada will be very happy to cooperate with India in both coal gasification as well as underground mining. Then Mr. Trudeau also referred to the possibility of moving forward on the FIPA and the CICA. This is the Foreign Investment Protection Agreement and the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Finally, Prime Minister extended a very warm invitation to Prime Minister Trudeau to visit India. He said we were looking forward to welcoming Mr. Trudeau in India. Mr. Trudeau immediately accepted that. He said, I would love to visit India and would also love to bring his family too. So that was the readout on the Prime Minister's bilateral with the Prime Minister of Canada. And then I'll turn over to Aman now to brief you on Prime Minister's intervention yesterday. As you all know, I have already tweeted about that. Many of you have already written about it. But Aman was there yesterday, and he can probably add some more insights, as well as what to expect from Prime Minister's participation today.
Thank you, Vikas. India's participation at the 2016 Nuclear Security Summit got off to an excellent start yesterday evening. The program began with Prime Minister Modi's participation at a working dinner, hosted by President Obama at the White House. And Prime Minister was one of the lead speakers on the topic of the dinner, which was the threat assessment. As you are all aware, this summit is about the threat of nuclear terrorism. So Prime Minister shared his thoughts on the broader threat assessment that underpins the discussions at the summit. You're also aware that before coming to Washington, Prime Minister was in Brussels, which has unfortunately suffered a horrific terror attack. So he shared with other leaders his thoughts, his analysis of the contemporary nature of the threat from terrorism. And he underlined that we need to catch up. We as governments need to catch up with the tools, the technologies, and the methods being deployed by terrorists in contemporary times. He also appreciated the initiative that President Obama has taken by convening this summit and by raising awareness of the threat of nuclear terrorism. And he offered some thoughts in how to ensure that President Obama's legacy on nuclear security endures in the years ahead. These discussions would continue today at the plenary sessions. The first plenary session is on national actions, where Prime Minister is going to underline some of the contributions that India is making or proposes to make. I would just highlight a few points from the Indian national actions that would also be formally part of India's national progress report submitted to the NSS. Firstly, PM is underlining the continued priority we will attach to nuclear security at home by continuing to strengthen the institutional framework, by strengthening the independence of our regulator, by devoting resources for training people in nuclear security, and by continuing to reflect our international obligations in our national actions. Second, PM will underline the continued priority we attach to the technology dimension of nuclear security. This means that we will advance the technologies behind the reprocess to reuse philosophy, the development of proliferation-resistant cycles, and the shift away from vulnerabilities associated with radioactive sources. An example I could give you of that is that we have stopped using cesium-137, which is a highly radioactive source, in powder form or in liquid form, and we would only be using vitrified forms of cesium-137 in medical applications. Moving on to what we propose to do with the IEA, India will make another contribution of $1 million to the IEA's Nuclear Security Fund. You would recall that we had made a similar contribution at the Seoul Summit in 2012. So we are following up with another contribution to the IEA. And significantly, we are going to engage with the IEA on its Nuclear Security Advisory Service, which is called IPAS. So we will hold a seminar with IEA experts on a future IPAS review of India's nuclear security measures. Now, there are a couple of other things that could be of interest to you from this exposition of India's national actions. We will be joining the so-called trilateral initiative, which is the joint statement of the previous three co-chairs of the Nuclear Security Summit, and which has been circulated at the IEA in the form of a document called INFCIRC 869. So this group of countries, which India is joining, are committed to holding the bar high on nuclear security. We would also be joining three other gift baskets in priority areas of counter-nuclear smuggling, the sharing of best practices through centers of excellence, such as our own GCNEP, and finally, the follow-up to the NSS decisions through a contact group in Vienna. And there'll be some other meetings that India intends to hold in the coming days to strengthen international cooperation, one with Interpol on countering nuclear smuggling, and another hosting a meeting of the Global Initiative to Combat Nuclear Terrorism in 2017. So as you can see, we would like to maintain the momentum on nuclear security issues. As Prime Minister pointed out yesterday, this is the time to maintain our vigil on nuclear terrorism and not to lower our guard. So let me stop here and
now the floor is open. The floor is now open for questions. Please, the questions to me should pertain to the meeting with Mr. Trudeau. My larger briefing will be at 2:15. Please be there, and at that point in time.
That was a live media briefing by MEA officials in Washington, and MEA officials started by talking about the bilateral that took place earlier today between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Australian counterpart Justin Trudeau, and this was the first bilateral between the two leaders after Justin Trudeau became the Prime Minister of Australia. In that meeting, MEA officials told us that Prime Minister Narendra Modi extended an invitation to Justin Trudeau to come to India. Not just that, Justin Trudeau congratulated the Prime Minister for his forceful intervention during the working level dinner at the start of the Nuclear Security Summit in Washington. And Prime Minister Modi talked about the vast untapped economic potential between India and Australia. And after that, The MEA officials also talked about the forceful points that were made by Prime Minister while he articulated India's position on nuclear terrorism. And MEA officials also talked about certain points that are expected to be mentioned in the National Progress Report that the Prime Minister is expected to present at the National Security Summit. And they contain India's proposal to make more financial contributions to the Nuclear Security Fund of the IAEA and to join other countries in their efforts against nuclear smuggling and to keep the standards high as far as checking nuclear terrorism is concerned. We'll get you more details as and when more developments take place. But as I was talking about earlier, Prime Minister Modi made a forceful intervention at the start of the Nuclear Security Summit in Washington today, speaking out against state actors working in cahoots with terrorists and traffickers. We will share with you PM's big message against terrorism on the show tonight.